name is Ben Tice, owner and director of Skol Marketing. We help businesses get online with web development and UX design, and then as well as enhance your online presence with services surrounding SEO, SEM, and social media. But honestly, my favorite part of my job is partnering with great organizations like Score and being able to, again, present these educational workshops and seminars on the different topics around digital marketing. So, what we talked about going over today is going to be Google Analytics 2.0, kind of beyond the basics. What we're going to kind of go forward with is understanding that you guys already have a base understanding of what Google Analytics is, and hopefully previewing a couple new things that could help you go a step or two further. So that's really what the basis of today is going to be about. If you guys have questions, please feel free to kind of chime in or, again, chat your questions, and I will make sure that I get all of them kind of answered and kind of go over them. We have a little bit of a smaller group, and especially when we have a higher kind of or more in-depth topic and a higher level kind of a topic, again, like honestly, it's okay to ask some of, again, more pertinent or more personal kind of questions to your situation. Absolutely, that's what we're kind of here for. So with all of that said, we're going to go ahead and get started. I am going to, there we go, pop this up. And so again, great. I'm happy you guys are here with me. As it was said, my name is Ben Tice, owner and director of Skol Marketing. And this is going to be Google Analytics 2.0, going beyond the basics. So what we're going to be kind of talking about today, like I said, is we're going to be going over and giving you guys some tips and strategy on things that you might not have known about if you've been using Google Analytics, or you may not have seen with some of our other previous kind of basic Google Analytics kind of workshops. So we're going to kind of go into benchmarking and cross-device tracking and scheduled reports and some of these other things that are really going to help you kind of take it to the next level and not only understand Google Analytics more, but also get more out of Google Analytics, more from a quality kind of perspective. So just very basically, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here, is we're still talking about the same Google Analytics. So we're still talking about the free service that Google allows us to have. It's the #1 analytics and metrics platform in the world. And at the end of the day, it's completely free. As we all know, and this is just always kind of my PSA kind of announcement, is that, again, how Google Analytics tracks, all the metrics that go on your site is via code that is implemented onto your site, especially with the analytics that we're kind of talking about here today. The reason I mention this is that I always want to make sure that you're paying attention, and this will help with some of the scheduled reports that we'll talk about. If you're just going into your account on a regular basis, if that's weekly, if that's bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever it may be. But what I'm kind of getting at here is always make sure that your account is working and running. And really how we know that it's working or running is that analytics are coming in. If we just see zeros across the board, that's obviously a red flag. Again, the reason I'm also bringing this up is a lot of times when we go through new years, when we're just going through just normal kind of business years, a lot of times things are potentially kind of changing. We might have, for instance, a new website rebuild. We might have a new strategy. We might be working with a new company. And one of the things that can happen that is just a little bit going to be, again, that can kind of happen. And you have to kind of pay attention for is going to be looking to make sure that your code does not get disrupted and that it's constantly, again, running. Because remember, Google Analytics cannot retroactively go get data, meaning that if your code comes disconnected, if your code becomes, turned off or anything like that, all of your analytics stop. So again, that's kind of my PSA announcement. I always like to just kind of mention that because it happens to the best of us. And if we lose that data, there's no way of getting it back. Okay, so with that, the other thing that I also want to kind of talk about, and we actually have a workshop that's just dedicated to this, is Google Analytics, again, Universal versus 4.0. So Google Analytics Universal is probably the one that you guys are most familiar with and have been using for the past 10 plus years. That is the Google Analytics that we've kind of come to know and to love and to be able to kind of utilize. Last year, Google started really kind of pushing out their new analytics called Google Analytics 4.0. Now, this is probably the biggest change in Google Analytics history, really, when we start talking about since the inception of it. The reason for it is the way that it's presented, the way that it tracks, the way that it looks at information, all of that kind of stuff is going to be different from what we're normally kind of seeing. So the reason I like to mention this is today we're going to be still, focusing on Google Analytics Universal. Another kind of PSA announcement that I like to kind of, tell people is that if you're seeing, again, workshops that we're producing, if you're seeing marketing materials out there, if you're seeing a lot of chatter happening about 4.0, here are two things to kind of remember. One is I highly encourage you to become familiar with 4.0 because it is essentially kind of the future with Google Analytics. The other thing to know is that Google allows you to have both versions. So you can have Google Analytics Universal, which the one you're more familiar with, and all the stuff that we're going to talk about here today. And you can start then playing around with 4.0. Because I will admit that Google Analytics 4.0 is, definitely what Google's pushing, and what, how they're tracking things and what they're tracking is super interesting, and it's going to be super helpful, and it's really some cool stuff. But at the same point is there are some faults to 4.0, and they've changed things so drastically that sometimes it may not align with the way that you're used to viewing data or being able to present data in marketing meetings or things like that. So even at Skol Marketing, for instance, we have both, and we utilize both quite a bit. So we make sure that we still, again, are in Google Analytics Universal with ourselves and with our clients, but also getting into 4.0. So I just want to make sure that that's understood, is that there is a completely new version of Google Analytics called 4.0 that you definitely should start familiarizing yourself with it. We also have a workshop on that if you're interested, and you can kind of dive into that a little bit further. But then also knowing that really today, we're really going to be talking about Google Analytics Universal with kind of the digging deeper and what we're going to be talking about here today. So how I would probably say it is our Google Analytics 1.0, which just introduced Google Analytics Universal, is probably the first step. This is probably the second step. And then maybe your third step is 4.0, just kind of building up to it because of the complexities and just the more in-depth that each of those kind of levels go.
Hey, Ben.
Yep.
Real quick, this is Sarah. And I'm sorry if this is a dumb question. So do you view that 4.0 in the same area that you view Universal? Do you log in the same area?
Yes, no, that's actually a great question, Sarah. So it's actually all the same. It's literally, you're just able to at the top to toggle between back and forth. So so you're able, so it's almost like if you've ever had more than one access to like multiple Google Analytics accounts, it's the same way that you'd shift between them. So like for us, like, we get access to a lot of accounts, and I just simply push down the drop down and I switch to client A, client B, and then Skol Marketing. It's really the same kind of process. You would just be able to switch because they're actually called properties. And so you'd be able to switch between your, Universal Analytics and your 4.0 Analytics, just be kind of like a drop down at the top of the page.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So that's the beauty of it. And thank you for asking that. Is again, yeah, you can still access it at google.com/analytics. You're still going to the same place. It's just, I'm going to warn you, the data is going to be presented in a way that you probably just haven't seen before, just with the theoretical and kind of the, again, just foundational changes that they're making. So, but again, we're going to be kind of talking about Universal right now, but I did want to spend some time with that because it's a huge hot topic, especially with Google Analytics, and you're going to have to familiarize yourself with that. But really what we're kind of talking about here today is going to be Universal. And so I put this up here because this is usually kind of the navigation that you'll see on Google Analytics. As we kind of all know, is we've got dashboard, real-time, audience, acquisition, behavior, conversions. These are the ones that we went over kind of in our 1.0 course. So if you need a refresher, I encourage you to kind of check back on that course. But really what we're kind of talking about is taking these and taking our analytics reports, and then again, going a step further in some of the things that we're going to introduce today. So before we get there, though, I do just want to take one little step back and start talking about from kind of an account level. And this not only goes into your Analytics 4.0. So Sarah, again, perfect question. This is also where you can actually switch between them, is if you went into the settings, that middle column, there's a little drop down there and you could actually kind of switch between them. But you can also see it at the top of the page. So as we all know, again, the admin section or the settings section is where we can, of course, manage all of the different settings and all the kind of fun stuff. We can give people access to our account and be able to kind of do that. There's a couple things, though, that I want to kind of point out to you guys that can be really helpful for making sure you have the correct data and maybe the way that it's presented to you. So the first one is called the referral exclusion list. And this is just the way to kind of get that. You go to admin, tracking info, referral exclusion list. This is, for instance, if a site for, sometimes either a spam or a known site that you don't want to track and you don't want to see, again, traffic coming from that site, you can actually block that out. So I'll give you guys a couple examples here of maybe why you would maybe want to look at the referral exclusion list. One is if you're seeing a lot of spam traffic, and this is probably one of the most ones. So if you go to your referral traffic and you're seeing a bunch of sites that have .xyz, and sometimes maybe you got hit with a spam bug, and you're talking that, wow, I just got 1,000 hits to my site, but they're all spam. Well, of course, that's going to kind of influx some of your stats and analytics and metrics reports. So you can actually go to the referral exclusion list, and you can actually type in that and be able to kind of exclude any of that traffic kind of coming in from those. I will say that, again, spam traffic coming in kind of the hundreds and thousands is a lot rarer than it used to be. Because Google's done a very good job of trying to, again, be able to identify them as they're coming on their site and blocking them right away. It's just not a perfect system, and Google's not perfect. And unfortunately, again, spam is constantly always trying to outdo the efforts of us to try to block them. So again, this is one of those areas where if you are seeing some spam, because it does happen, you can actually block them individually. The other one, like I was saying, is if there's any other type of site out there that you don't want to see traffic from, you can also block it here. Like, I'll give you an example. I have some clients that use an internal kind of CRM system. And, again, there are links like that could go back to their website because of the way the CRM is. Well, sometimes we'll put that CRM in there because that's not really good, again, traffic coming to the site. It's all internal. It's most likely just a mistake. They're going to kind of come to the site and get off. And so that might be an instance of something that you control that maybe you don't want to kind of see. Maybe it's your billing system. Maybe, again, it could even be another site that you don't care to kind of see included in there for whatever kind of reason. But again, that's where you're able to kind of do this, and that's called the referral exclusion list. Another really big one is filtering IP addresses out. This actually has become super important, not only for as you're trying to get more qualitative data, but especially since we, for instance, have a lot of people working from home. This is one that you might try to have to get your hands around a little bit more than you used to. So what the filter IP address does is essentially what it says right there is we can filter out IP addresses. So what we can essentially do, what this essentially filters out is maybe, again, tracking you going to the site, your employees going to the site, your people at your office going to your site, because again, maybe you want to track them, but a lot of times, as we know, that's most likely not what we're, overall trying to kind of, track. And that can definitely influence a lot of our stats potentially positively or negatively, depending on how either yourself or those employees or colleagues are going to your site. So what you can do is you can set up filters to actually block out. So if anybody comes to your site that matches that IP address, they're able to then be kind of, not included. They're still able to access the site. So that's the thing is all these exclusion lists are filtering out. They're still able to access the site. It's just not counted or, again, calculated on Google Analytics. And you might be asking yourself, well, Ben, that's great, but how do I know what my IP address is? You simply just have to be connected to that network. Go to Google and just literally type in, what is my IP? If you type that in, they'll give you the code. You simply copy that and put that into your system. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky, though, is if you have a lot of people working from home, you essentially need to get them to do that when they're at home and send you their IP address. So we've done that before where we just send out kind of a mass ping or notification email and say, hey, when you guys are at home, go to Google, type in this, send us that code, and then we add it to the filter IP address, especially if more and more people are searching from home, again, if you want to block your colleagues or yourself from there. So that's another really kind of important one to kind of look at. Another one is kind of managing your scheduled reports. So we're going to kind of go over here in just a second here about how to set up scheduled reports, but this is where you can manage all of them. So you can have them sent to multiple people. You can extend the timeline of when they kind of are, how long they're going to be repeating. That is one thing to know about Google Analytics is they don't allow you just to set up a scheduled kind of report and let it run forever. They a lot of times have 6 to 12 month kind of time periods. That can sometimes be frustrating, I will admit, because you sometimes have to set yourself a reminder, or if you notice that you didn't get an automated report from Google, but you can essentially go into the admin section. And when you set up scheduled reports, it will automatically default to say, hey, we're gonna send these you for 6 months, and then we're gonna pause them. You can extend that right away to 12 months, but that's the maximum you can do right now. So, again, schedule reports are absolutely something I recommend, are really helpful because you can set up what you want to look at once and not have to continuously go to google.com/analytics, especially if you're sharing it with other team members or colleagues or other agencies or whatever you're kind of working with, referral partners, within your organization and your marketing efforts. But just know that you want to keep an eye on how long those are going to run for before they're kind of paused. And then last but not least is manage user access to your account. We kind of talked about this, just like pretty much every other Google product now, you can give access to people via their email. So you don't have to be giving out your login, which you really should never do anymore. And Google's really starting to crack down on that. So this is where you're able to give access, and then you can, restrict some of that access and be able to kind of control those different kind of levels. So those are some things that hopefully, again, if you knew about those, great, kind of just review. If you didn't, those are some things to potentially kind of look at that can really kind of help either the quality of your stats or just, potentially accessing your stats as well from there. Okay, so scheduling reports. So, what we can do is anytime that you see a report on your, again, screen, you're able to essentially create or put that into a collection of reports that can be emailed to you. This is honestly super, super valuable. And I use this all the time because, again, like, you'd have to remember to kind of log in manually to google.com/analytics, search around. And yes, you can have your dashboards, you can have that, but it's really nice when it's just simply emailed to you in your inbox and you can kind of review it from there. So if you see a report, what you want to do is simply find the share button. And what you're going to be able to kind of do is you're just going to see a screen that pops up right here. You're going to be able to put in the to address. So if this is your email address, most likely you might be sending it to 2, 3, 4 different types of people. You can send as many email addresses as you want. And then you're able to kind of pick the attachment type. Usually PDF is the most recommended because you're going to be able to visually see all the graphs. So pretty much what it does is anything you see on your screen, that's how it's going to be sent back to you. And then you can also send the frequency. You could just share that once, but most often we're going to probably do this, again, most people do it monthly, but you can do it daily, you can do it weekly, you can do it quarterly, again, you can figure out however you want to manage how long those are sent. So then what you do is then you simply click send, and Google now creates a scheduled report for you. Now, every time you want to, send another report to yourself, what's kind of nice is that you do this same process and you click the share button, but then right above that share button, if you're looking at the screenshot here, you see a little link that says add to an existing email. What's kind of nice about that is instead of getting 5 different emails from Google, you can click the add to an existing email and it will compile all of them into one and send you all reports underneath that. So as you find more and more useful reports, you can be able to kind of add them to an existing email and be able to have them kind of sent to you. So it can be really helpful and really kind of useful. And then you can kind of be able to manage it from there and who's getting it and obviously frequency and what's being sent. Okay, so now getting into a little bit more of some of the different things that, again, you might be able to take yourself a step further with when it comes to analytics. The first one is under audience, the audience types of reports, and it's called benchmarking. What this one does, and it's really kind of a cool kind of concept, is you get to kind of compare your web traffic with different types of websites in similar or even potentially different industries. So what you're able to do is when you sign up for Google Analytics, you have to kind of pick an industry and you kind of, say your location, you essentially say what all of these different parameters are. And so then Google uses that and then kind of compiles that and then kind of shares some of that data blindly. And what I mean by blindly is that no one, again, you can't go and say, hey, I want to look up, entertainmentweekly.com and I want to see their traffic. I want to see NFL.com. I want to see my competitor. You can't do that. But again, what it does is it blindly, again, aggregates all this data and allows us to kind of be able to compare ourselves. So you can kind of see as an example here, this site, for instance, that we have is going to show, hey, we're going to be in the internet and telecom industry. We're going to compare to anybody that's pretty much across the world as an all, or we could pare that down. And we're also going to compare ourselves. This is really kind of the cool one, is the size by daily sessions. So this is something that most small businesses are most likely going to be in the 0 to 99. But as your business increases or your web presence or your web traffic increases, you might want to see how you not only compare to someone else that's maybe larger than you, or potentially smaller than you, or that's also, the same size as you, even if you're large or small. That's what that essentially gets to kind of do, and you're able to kind of see that. Then what's also kind of nice, if you look to the right of that, I know it's a little kind of lighter gray, but it says there are 251,932 properties contributing to this benchmark. So it's not just, again, there's 10 other websites out there. It's giving you a few more to kind of look at that, again, obviously the sample pool that we're kind of, analyzing this data is quite large. Excuse me. And so what we can kind of do then too is we can compare different types of channels. So you can kind of see right here, this is a channel report. So I'm being able to kind of compare the direct traffic compared to, again, these criteria that are up in the red box. So this is telling us that we're actually 27% below average in this kind of instance. And you can kind of go, obviously this example that we have here with this particular site is mainly kind of below average, but you can also see that there's some green arrows that are going to show us that we're above average in certain things like that as well. Now, again, like this information on its face value, again, it doesn't mean you're doing things right or wrong, but it can definitely help you, because I know one of the biggest questions that I get all the time is, Ben, well, how many sessions should I have? How good is that compared to my industry? What should I be striving for? You always want to be striving for growth. And we talked about that in kind of our 1.0, and we talk about that constantly. We always want to be striving for that qualitative data. But really, when we look at this kind of stuff, this also allows us to kind of compare, to kind of put it in kind of perspective. And like I said, you can decide to, to change it up and to compare yourself to other people around the world, again, just here in the US, different sizes, all of that kind of stuff. And of course, all of those different things are going to have different types of factors into this. And then we even get into locations and device. So again, you can really take a lot of those audience reports that we've come to know and use, like channels, which technically is acquisition, but again, the different channels, your location, your device, all of that type of stuff, that is your predetermined reports in Google. But now we can actually start benchmarking those. So this can help you kind of take that a step further and really be able to kind of give you more of that qualitative kind of analysis compared to other people potentially in your industry. So another really big one is cross-device. And this honestly is what you're going to see a lot of in Google Analytics 4.0. So we can still get this data kind of within Universal, but it's almost more of like, you want to think about it as like a beta level, because Google Analytics took this kind of concept and then put that into kind of 4.0 as their basis. Really what we're kind of talking about here is, we all know a lot of us, again, may start on a mobile device right here and then go to a tablet, then go to their computer, or vice versa. So what this does is this tracks that kind of behavior and the different site interaction across the different devices that people may be utilizing, and then putting them into 3 different categories of desktop, tablet, or mobile. And then of course the different kind of, again, cross references there as well. So you can kind of see this, you can definitely see the device overlap. So this particular example is saying this site right now, over that time period that they chose, the number one way, again, of devices that people saw was desktop. Then number 2 was actually, tablet. But the number 3rd way that people were interacting with the site was desktop to tablet, back to desktop. Then you can see desktop, mobile, desktop. So you can see there's these different ways that people are kind of jumping in and jumping around, again, from there. Now, everybody's is going to be different. A lot of, we're going to have a lot of factors, but it is really kind of cool visually, as well as honestly implementing this and knowing that people are doing this. It can be really useful. Again, this also goes why to, like, when you're looking at your website, when you're looking at your marketing strategies and your campaigns, understanding and having evidence and stats to back this up, that people are going to be viewing these different types of campaigns, and most likely your website then, on different devices. It might be coming back to it. So this might help, again, you either validate or influence some of your decisions on maybe some of the devices that you're going to be advertising on, or also taking a look at your website on those different devices to make sure that we have that user path and it's as seamless as possible. Now, of course, no matter what you do, accessing a website and engaging with it on a desktop is absolutely going to be different than a mobile device. But again, we can absolutely try to have that synergy and to be able to kind of look at and do that. So this is a really kind of not only, again, useful one, but it's really kind of cool. And a lot of times people haven't been able to kind of visualize this and see this. And this is what cross-device allows you to be able to do and to kind of dig into some of those reports. And you can even dig a little bit further in here, and we can get some more information when it gets into kind of some of the channels. So again, if they came in from, again, organic, how did that look compared to, again, direct traffic compared to social traffic? Again, we can look at all of those different types of kind of analytics and take it even a step further. But this is something that can be super useful. And at the end of the day, is kind of really super cool to kind of look at to see, again, how people are accessing your site. Another big one to also look at, and this just even goes back to when you're just viewing normal reports. This isn't a new report, but it's something that you can pretty much add to any report that's out there, and it's called secondary dimensions. So if we go to any acquisition report, we go to any audience report that you heard us talk about, like for instance, in our 1.0 course, what we can do is we can essentially dig deeper and almost cross-reference it with another kind of parameter. So like, for instance, you can kind of see, again, some of the different examples here, but you might want to cross this with saying, okay, so I'm looking at the top pages viewed on my site, the top one there, the home page, the about, the team page, the jobs. Maybe I want to add another dimension to say, okay, how many of them came in from a social media account and what did that look like? Maybe I want to see, again, when they went to these pages, if they came in from organic or, again, directly typed that in. So you can start to add that other kind of dimension. So instead of just looking at, for instance, like this top screenshot and just seeing, okay, this is how many people came into my homepage. This is how many people, again, this is the bounce rate for the jobs page. Now we can add that second dimension and be able to kind of cross-reference it with something else and tell us more about that. And you can see, obviously, the possibilities here. You can already see all of these different dimensions that you can add to this. So the possibilities of what your reports can look like can really magnify quite a bit here. And this is where again, you might want to just take a step back and start to kind of work on some of them and just kind of be able to see it. Again, some of the more popular ones are, if I'm looking at a certain page, I want to see potentially, again, if they came from a social site, to break that down. If I'm looking at, again, a location report, I want to potentially kind of see, again, break that down from, did they come in from organic search and what that looked like? They came in from direct. They actually typed in Skol Marketing. They came in from an ad that came in. So again, you're able to take whatever report you're there, but then apply it to almost something else that you're most likely familiar with, if it is a location or if someone came in from an acquisition or a social media account. There's even some e-commerce different levels that we can actually cross-reference to if you have e-commerce set up onto your site and you have that integrated into Google Analytics as well. So this can definitely be a little bit of a rabbit hole. But it is really important to kind of know that, again, not only are we showing you some of the different reports that you can see that you may not have been familiar with, or even some of the admin tips and some of those settings, but now we can pretty much take any report that we've had, and now we can add that second dimension to it as well. And another one that we can look to kind of do is going to be kind of goals. And so here's another thing too, is when it comes to conversions and goals, I will say Google Analytics 4.0 is, again, absolutely doing some really, really kind of cool things when it comes to being able to kind of do less coding on your site and actually having, Google automatically track things for you and being able to kind of set up your conversions and goals. Honestly, between cross-device and conversions and goals, that's what 4.0 is really kind of built around. Like I said, I definitely still think it needs a little bit of work. And, again, from a user experience standpoint, and Google is working on that, and also just takes a little bit to kind of get familiar with it. But you can also do a lot of these things within the universal analytics as well, or kind of your 3.0, which we've been kind of talking about. So you can use goals to measure how often users complete a specific action. Excuse me. And here are 4 different types of goals that you can kind of set up on your site, and to kind of break them down a little bit further for you. So if you've heard the word goals, if you've heard the word conversions, here's kind of some examples that you can actually take this a step further. And here's one thing that I always like to kind of tell people is sometimes we get in our mind that, okay, I'm going to track conversions. And that means that someone, again, filled out a contact form and wants to talk to me and is a lead. Someone bought something and actually, again, purchased something on my site. Absolutely, those can be conversions. But they're, really a conversion is meant to essentially track anything that someone does on your site that you find of value. And so, for instance, then maybe that is signing up for a newsletter. Now, obviously, signing up for a newsletter and making a purchase on your site, those are going to be different priorities. Of course, it's much more valuable if someone signs up on your site, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't or couldn't track newsletters to actually, show that there's some value to maybe either our marketing efforts, our internal efforts, whatever it may be. We can be able to kind of track that. And so here's a couple different, 4 different types that we can kind of see. So one is destination. So, again, example, thank you for registering a web page or an app screen. So this is normally, if you want someone to fill out a contact form, this is a perfect one. Destination, you have them go to a thank you page. Now you're being able to kind of track that every time. Duration. Maybe you decide that, hey, if someone's spending 10 minutes or longer spent on our site, maybe it's a certain section of our site, that would be important to kind of know, because maybe we put a lot of resources into that. Well, now we can do a duration goal type and set that up. Pages per screens per session. So a user views a specific number of pages or screens so that they're going further than just looking at our homepage or going to our service pages. Maybe this person has visited, viewed 5 or 6 different pages on that time. And the example, those numbers, you get to change that. So maybe it doesn't have to be 10 minutes. Maybe if you say someone's on your site for 5 minutes, I want to track that. Or maybe it's 15. Same thing with pages. Maybe if it's someone, looks at 3 pages, that's of value to you. So again, you get to kind of be able to kind of control that, but what essentially this is doing is this is allowing you to add another qualitative kind of metric or parameter to the metrics that you're kind of essentially looking at, is the better way to say that, is that it's not just looking at all this quantitative, you're now telling Google Analytics, this is what's of value to me, and this is what I find important. So let's set that up and kind of, look to kind of do that, so that when people do that, I can actually start to equate either some type of value or some type of effort that went into that to kind of see what's kind of happening. And last but not least is an event. So, a lot of times event is like a single kind of action. So you can kind of see a video play. If someone downloads a PDF, that's another really big kind of event, because again, Google inherently struggles kind of tracking PDFs. So that's always a good one that I recommend to people, is if you have a lot of PDFs or download this ebook or whatever it may be, then, again, definitely put an event type of goal on there, where then you can kind of track how often that was essentially clicked and thus downloaded. So this takes, again, kind of conversions kind of to the next level and allows you to do some more things with it, with these different types of goals and the 4 specific ones we're talking about here. So another thing that I kind of like to kind of take people through is going to be setting up a goal. And so what's really kind of nice is, again, I showed you some of the different types of goals there. What's really kind of cool though, is you might be asking yourself, well, Ben, that sounds like a lot of code. That sounds a lot of things like there. A couple things to know is, one thinking is that if you can do this yourself, what's kind of nice is Google has a lot of templates that you can follow to kind of be able to do. Or if you decide that you want help setting these up, the beauty of it is that once they're set up, it's, again, it's set and done. And so you don't have to necessarily have someone keep helping you, again, with your goal. Is once they set it up and it's set up correctly, it's good to go. So either if you decide to do this internally or externally, what's really kind of nice is you have some of those options. And a lot of times, again, it's not going to be too cost prohibitive. And if you feel comfortable doing this, they also have these predetermined templates. And you can kind of see the different types of ones here, and they give you kind of examples. So if we're doing revenue, placing an order, creating an account, contact us, compare information, social, again, kind of connect, share it to a social media site or email that out. So you can set up any of these types, and these are the different templates that they kind of have. Now you absolutely can do custom ones. And, again, that's definitely going to take a, again, higher level, and you're not using a template. You have to code everything kind of yourself, but that is, again, of course, available to you. And another one that is also there's called SMART goals. Now you have to have Google Ads running this, but what they'll do though is they'll connect into your Google Analytics, and they'll try to essentially they'll think using artificial intelligence what people did on your site with some value, and then list that out. This actually is kind of being done in 4.0 actually automatically for you. You don't have to run ads. So kind of these SMART goals is what's now a really big feature in 4.0. But you can still set these up in analytics, in classic analytics that you still, again, of course, as we've talked about, might be more familiar with. So when we look at kind of filling out a template, I'm just going to kind of take you through it very briefly. It's very kind of straightforward, but it's just kind of nice to know that they do a lot of the hard work for you. So for instance, this one, we'll just do an example of filling out kind of a contact form and going to a thank you page. It's the most kind of basic, again, conversion that most people do. And it's really usually important to kind of track that as well. So of course, we give it a name. We can, start to categorize these different with goal slot IDs and stuff like that. That's just more for your internal kind of purpose. And then for instance, on this one, we're going to say, okay, we're going to do destination. When they go to our thank you page, because we have our contact form set up that once they fill it out, they go to that thank you page. We're able to kind of be able to do that. Now, again, you could do smart goals. As you see, it's blurred out because this example isn't running ads. But then what's really kind of nice is we go and we simply say, okay, so the destination, we want to track the thank you page. So whatever URL you have in there, usually a lot of times it's, slash, thank you page, welcome message, whatever it may be, then we'd actually be able just to put that URL in there. And then here's another kind of cool part is all of these, there's actually a value. So a value, you can actually assign a monetary value to the conversion. And again, of course, this is very arbitrary, but you might say, okay, if someone is filling out this form, I'm just going to say it's an arbitrary, it's worth $25 to me. Then what that does is when you start doing analytics reports, like on your acquisition, on those different types of, again, audience, we can actually start to pull in some of that data and actually start to overlay that on, okay, when someone comes from an organic search, again, result, or someone comes in for my paid ads, or someone finds me just by doing, or on social media and comes to my site, this is kind of the value that I'm equating to that because of that. Now, of course, if you have e-commerce and stuff like that, there's already a value already inherently in there, because if someone purchases a $10 item, that's going to be $10 value. But that's what's really kind of cool about this. And I actually love using this feature. Now, again, just realizing it's all arbitrary, but all of us would admit that most often that if they fill out a contact form and it's a, hey, I want to get more information, I want to sign up for a free demo, any of those types of things, there's going to be value in that. Now, of course, you still have to close them and stuff like that, but that's part of a sales process. This is filling that funnel and getting as many people as possible to be able to do that, and then ultimately kind of tracking that. So you're able to kind of put that in there, and I encourage you to kind of test around and play around with that. And then last but not least is you get to verify your goal. I love this because you can click that button and Google will make sure that the template and the conversion that you're trying to set up actually works. And so you can make sure you can kind of troubleshoot that if not. And then once that's done, you simply click save, and we're going to be able to then, be able to start to kind of track that and be able to have that infused into all of our reports. That's what's great about this. And the thing is, though, is you would have to keep setting up all of these conversions for everyone that you want to do. So if we went back to, okay, if they fill out this form, I want that to be a conversion. But again, if I want them to view, 5 pages or more, then I have to set that up as a conversion. But just as a reminder of what I just kind of talked about previously, is once they're set up, they're ready to go. So you don't have to be concerned about, constantly monitoring them or paying someone to do that or whatnot. Once you get it set up, you're good and set to kind of go. So that's ultimately what we're kind of talking about here with Google Analytics. It's really using the base knowledge that we've had with analytics, understanding audience, understanding acquisition, understanding behavior and conversion types of reports, but then being able to have some of those admin tips and potentially being able to filter out some of that IP address or the referral exclusion list, being able to kind of start to benchmark and compare ourselves with other different types of, again, companies that are in our same realm. Or potentially, again, setting up these conversions now to be able to actually, again, take that to the next level and to say, hey, I know who's on my site. I know where they're coming from. I know some of those efforts, but ultimately, are they doing what I want them to be doing? And I can prioritize that value. Again, you can say that if someone stays on your page for 10 minutes, maybe that's worth $5. But if they actually fill out a form, that's worth $50. That's another way that you can kind of even prioritize that internally. So I hope that helps you guys take your analytics to the next level. And I hope at least even briefly introduced 4.0 to you, because that is something absolutely is going to be that next step to kind of be able to do. And really, like we kind of talked about, is you're going to kind of have to be able to balance both for the foreseeable future. Now, a lot of this will change, and I encourage you to stay connected with us as we kind of bring you all those updates and as we have been doing for the past 10 years, and to be able to kind of do that. But with that said, as I'd love to open it up for people that have questions, if you want to unmute yourself, you're more than happy to do that and speak it. Otherwise, if you guys want to put any of your questions into chat, I'd be more than happy to kind of take those as well. I did get one question throughout the presentation that someone sent directly to me that said, hey, Ben, so do you recommend that we use 4.0 more than universal? And so I wouldn't necessarily say you have to use it more, but I'm just saying that you have to use those, again, you have to be familiar with both, because again, the way that the data is, is laid out and what you're probably more familiar with is going to be universal. But 4.0 offers some really kind of cool things that are inherent in there. Like I referenced a couple of them throughout the presentation, but like, for instance, one of them is they're really built around kind of conversions. So the way that they bring up data is really built around kind of conversions. Another really kind of cool one is a lot of these goal types that we're talking about is Google will use AI and try to automatically codelessly actually install a lot of these kind of for you. And there might be some that they're tracking that you find useful, maybe don't. But like, like one that I know of that I think is really kind of cool is if people, again, scroll down on your page and went further onto your page. Well, if nobody has any other questions, that's completely fine. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. As we've kind of talked about before, is if you guys have any questions, ongoing, here's my information. I'd be more than happy to be able to kind of connect with you and to be able to, again, answer those questions as they come about. I also want to offer another thing that we do here at Skol Marketing as a way to give back is we offer free consultations. This isn't a sales pitch. If you want to talk about our services, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about that, of course, too. But really, if you're looking more for, hey, Ben, okay, can you help me? Can you walk, me through benchmarking a little bit more one-on-one? Hey, so can you make sure that my conversion is set up? We can do that, and we do that as a way to kind of give back. So if you're interested in, again, talking about Google Analytics, maybe you have some other questions around SEO or SEM or anything like that, we can definitely talk about that. We just know that sometimes we just need a little bit more extra help to kind of, answer some questions more one-on-one instead of kind of classroom style like this. And so that's why we offer those free consultations. So if that's of interest to you, I encourage you to kind of check us out online, or you can send me a direct email at btice@Skol Marketing, and we can be able to kind of set one of those up for you.
Hey,
and
Ben?
last but not least, yes.
Oh, go for it. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Jim, last but not least is if you guys like these types of workshops, we have about 10 different workshops that we speak on. So I fully encourage you to kind of go to our skolmarketing.com/workshops page, and to be able, you can follow us from there. Otherwise, to connect with us on social media. And you also can see a lot of our previously recorded workshops on our YouTube page that you can watch on demand. And so I encourage you to check out some of the dates on those because we're constantly updating those, but you can actually see a lot of the previously recorded ones on our YouTube channel as well.